The first sign came from a small satellite that nobody cared about anymore. It was called Watcher 9, and it had been launched 11 years ago to study solar wind. Most people at the space agency had forgotten it existed. It sat quietly at a Lagrange point between the Earth and the Sun, sending back the same boring numbers every day. Then one night, it sent something strange. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the only person awake in the small monitoring room when the alert came through. She was 34 years old, tired, and drinking her fourth cup of coffee. She worked the night shift because it was quiet, and quiet was good for thinking. When the alert flashed on her screen, she almost ignored it. Watcher 9 sent false alarms all the time. Old satellites did that. But this alarm was different. It was not a sensor error. It was a shadow. Something big had passed between Watcher 9 and a distant star, blocking the starlight for less than a second. The satellite's cameras had caught it by pure luck, because it happened to be pointed in the right direction at the right moment. Elena pulled up the raw data and stared at it for a long time. The shadow was shaped like nothing she knew. It was not an asteroid. It was not a comet. It had straight edges. She did what any good scientist would do. She checked it twice, then 3 times, to make sure she was not seeing a mistake. She was not. Then she picked up the phone and called her supervisor, even though it was 3 in the morning. Her supervisor, a calm man named Robert Kim, listened to her explain everything. He did not laugh at her, which she appreciated, because it would have been easy to laugh at a story about a mystery shadow with straight edges. Instead, he told her to send him the data right away. 2 hours later, 3 more scientists were awake and looking at the same numbers. By morning, the story had grown. Watcher 9 was not the only satellite that had seen something strange. Once people knew what to look for, they found small clues in data from other satellites, some going back almost a year. A tiny gravity pull here, a strange radio echo there. Nothing so big that anyone would have noticed on its own. But together, the clues painted a picture. There was something hiding in the asteroid belt, in the wide empty space between Mars and Jupiter. And it was big, bigger than any spacecraft humans had ever built. The news did not go to the public right away. It went first to a small group of government leaders, scientists, and military officers from many different countries. This was the way things worked now. After the wars of the past century, after too many close calls with disaster, the nations of Earth had built something new, a single group called the Global Defense Council, made to handle threats that no single country could handle alone. It was not perfect. Countries still argued, but when something like this happened, they came together fast. General Marcus Chen led the military side of the council. He was 60 years old, with gray hair cut very short, and a calm way of speaking that made people trust him even when the news was bad. He had spent his whole career preparing for threats that never came. Now, it seemed, one finally had. "Tell me again what we know," he said, standing in front of a large screen in an underground room outside Geneva. Around the table sat generals, scientists, and diplomats from a dozen countries. Elena Vasquez was there too, brought in because she was the one who found it. She felt very small in that room, surrounded by powerful people, but she made herself speak clearly. "We believe there is a large object, or group of objects, hidden in the asteroid belt," she said. "Based on the gravity data, it is very heavy, heavier than anything natural that size should be. Based on the shadow we caught, it has straight lines and flat surfaces. Nature does not build things with straight lines. Something built this on purpose." "Could it be a rock formation? A strange asteroid?" asked one of the diplomats. "We do not think so," Elena said. "The object has been slowly changing position over the past year, in ways that rocks do not move. Something is steering it." A long silence followed. Then General Chen spoke. "So we are saying there is an alien ship hiding near Earth?" "Yes," Elena said. "That is what the data says." Nobody in the room laughed. Nobody made a joke. They had all seen enough strange things over their careers to know that sometimes the impossible was simply true. Over the next few weeks, humans built new tools to study the hidden object more closely. They could not send a ship close enough without risking discovery, so instead, they built better eyes. Old telescopes were pointed at the asteroid belt. New satellites were rushed into orbit. Scientists across the world worked together, sharing data faster than ever before, because everyone understood what was at stake. Slowly, the picture became clearer. It was not one object, it was many, a fleet. The best guess, from the mathematics of gravity and light, was that there were at least 20 large ships hiding together, using some kind of technology to bend light around themselves and stay hidden. They were arranged the way a fleet would be arranged, not scattered randomly like space rocks. And they had been there, some experts believed, for years, maybe longer. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Why were they hiding? Tomas Reyes, a young data analyst working under Elena, was the one who found the answer that changed everything. Tomas was 26, quick with numbers, and used to being the youngest person in every room. He had been assigned to look through old satellite archives for any earlier signs of the fleet's arrival. It was slow, boring work, until it was not. He found a burst of unusual energy from 8 years earlier, recorded by an old weather satellite that had happened to be pointed the wrong way and caught it by accident. At the time, nobody had noticed. It looked like noise, but when Tomas compared it to what they now knew about the fleet's location, it matched perfectly. They arrived 8 years ago, Tomas told Elena, showing her the numbers with shaking hands. Something happened when they got here. This burst of energy looks like damage, like an engine failure, or a battle. Elena stared at the data for a long time. You are saying they did not come here on purpose. You are saying they were running from something. I think so, Tomas said. And I think whatever they were running from might still be out there. This news changed the whole conversation at the Global Defense Council. If the fleet had arrived by accident, wounded and hiding, then perhaps it was not planning an invasion. Perhaps it was simply trying to survive, the same as any wounded animal that hides in the grass, waiting to heal. But not everyone agreed with this gentle idea. Some military leaders argued that a wounded predator was still a predator, and once it healed, it might attack. They wanted to strike first, while the fleet was still weak, using human missiles and space weapons to destroy it before it could recover. General Chen listened to both sides for many long meetings. He was a careful man, and he did not like quick decisions, especially ones that could not be undone. If we attack and we are wrong, he said in one meeting, we start a war with beings who may be far more advanced than us, and we do it without knowing anything about them. If we do nothing, and we are wrong, they may attack us when they are ready. Both choices carry risk. We need a third choice. The third choice came from a quiet voice in the room, one that had not spoken much until then. Dr. Amara Osei was an expert not in weapons or physics, but in human history, and how different groups of people had made peace after long conflicts. She had been added to the council almost as an afterthought, because someone thought her experience with negotiation might be useful someday. Now, someday had arrived. We do not attack, and we do not hide from them either, she said. We let them see that we know they are there. We let them come closer, on our terms, in a way we control. We show them we are not afraid, and we show them we are not aggressive. We give them a chance to trust us before they have any reason to fear us. That is a huge risk, one general said. We would be inviting an unknown alien fleet toward our planet. They are already near our planet, Dr. Osei answered. The only question is whether they come closer as strangers, hiding in the dark, always afraid of being found, or whether they come closer as something else. Something we get to shape. General Chen thought about this for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. We do not know their strength, he said. We do not know their number, or their weapons, or their intentions, but we do know one thing. We found them, and they do not know we found them. That is our advantage, and we should not waste it by attacking too soon, or hiding and pretending we saw nothing. Dr. Osei is right. We let them come closer, and we choose how that happens. It was decided. Humanity would not attack. Humanity would not run. Instead, humanity would watch, prepare, and wait, letting the hidden fleet believe it was still a secret, while every nation on Earth quietly readied itself for whatever might come next. Over the following months, the plan took shape. Military forces around the world began building new defenses, but carefully, so that nothing looked unusual from space. Old satellites were quietly replaced with better ones. New ground stations were built in remote places, disguised as ordinary research centers. Submarines were moved into new positions in the oceans, ready to launch if needed, but staying silent unless called upon. At the same time, scientists worked on something even more important, a way to communicate. If the fleet ever came close enough, humans wanted to be ready to speak with them, not just fight them. Linguists, mathematicians, and computer scientists worked together to build a system that could translate patterns of light, sound, and radio signals into something both species might understand, based on shared ideas like numbers, shapes, and the basic rules of physics that should be the same anywhere in the universe. Elena Vasquez found herself moved from her quiet night shift into the center of this massive effort. She did not always feel ready for it, but she worked hard, and she learned fast. Tomas Reyes stayed at her side, and the two of them became close partners, sharing long nights staring at data, trying to learn everything they could about their unseen neighbors without ever making contact. Slowly, over the first year of watching, more clues emerged. The fleet was not one single type of ship. There seemed to be larger vessels, likely for living and storage, and smaller ones, likely for defense or scouting. Occasionally, a small ship would leave the main group and travel a short distance before returning, as if checking on something, or searching for supplies. Sometimes there were flashes of light between the ships, too fast and complex to be natural, that scientists believed might be a form of communication, or perhaps simple repair work being done with tools that produced bright energy. The fleet did not move toward Earth. It did not move away either. It simply stayed in the asteroid belt, healing, waiting, watching the stars the same way humans were watching it. One night, almost a year after the discovery, Elena sat with Tomas in the monitoring room, looking at a new image captured by one of their improved telescopes. For the first time, they could see a rough shape of one of the smaller ships, caught briefly as it moved between two larger vessels. It was not a perfect picture, but it was enough to see details that no human had ever seen before. Curved metal, or something like metal, shaped in ways that seemed almost alive, with patterns that reminded Elena of scales, or feathers, or something in between. "They are beautiful," Elena said quietly, surprising herself. "They are also very real," Tomas said. "This is not a theory anymore. This is happening." Elena nodded, staring at the image. Somewhere out there, hidden among the rocks and dust of the asteroid belt, a fleet of alien ships was slowly healing from whatever had hurt them so badly. And on Earth, an entire planet was quietly preparing, waiting for the day when hiding would no longer be possible for either side. That day, though nobody knew it yet, was closer than anyone expected. Because far beyond the edge of the solar system, something else was moving. Something the hidden fleet had been running from, and it was following a trail that led straight toward the sun and the small blue planet that circled it, and the fleet of wounded ships that had chosen it as a hiding place. The countdown, though silent and invisible, had already begun. In the weeks after the first alert, Elena's quiet life changed completely. She was moved out of her small apartment near the research center and given a room inside a secure facility, where she could work at any hour without needing to explain her comings and goings to curious neighbors. At first, she found this strange and a little lonely. She missed her morning walks to the coffee shop near her home, and she missed the ordinary chatter of people who knew nothing about hidden fleets or straight-edged shadows. But she also understood why it was necessary. The fewer people who noticed a change in her habits, the safer the secret would stay. Tomas Reyes had an easier time adjusting, mostly because he was young enough to see the whole situation as an adventure, rather than a burden. He had grown up reading old stories about first contact with alien life, the kind written decades earlier by people who could only imagine what it might be like. He never thought he would end up living inside one of those stories himself, and some nights, lying awake in his new secure quarters, he found it hard to believe it was real at all. "Do you ever feel like we are in over our heads?" he asked Elena one night, as the two of them reviewed yet another batch of confusing telescope data. "Every day," Elena admitted, "but somebody has to look at the numbers, and it might as well be people who are careful and honest about what they do not know." Their work, in those early months, was less about grand discoveries and more about patient, careful checking. Every new piece of data had to be tested many times before anyone trusted it. Every theory had to be challenged from every angle before it was allowed into a report that would reach the council. This slow, careful process frustrated some of the younger scientists, who wanted quick answers to match the size of the mystery in front of them. But Elena, older and more experienced, understood that mistakes made in haste, when dealing with something this important, could cost more than anyone was willing to pay. As the months passed, more resources poured into the effort. New telescopes were built in remote mountain ranges, chosen for their clear skies and distance from city lights. Deep-sea research stations, officially studying ocean life, quietly expanded their communication equipment to help relay data faster between different parts of the world. Universities that had never worked together before suddenly found themselves sharing information through secure channels, their scientists sworn to secrecy, but thrilled at the chance to be part of something so important. General Chen, though a military man through and through, spent many long hours simply listening to the scientists explain their findings, asking careful questions, trying to understand enough of the science to make good decisions. He was not a man who pretended to know things he did not, and this humility earned him respect from the researchers, who might otherwise have distrusted a military leader stepping into their world. "I do not need to understand every equation," he told Elena once, during a quiet moment between meetings. "I need to understand what the equations mean for the safety of billions of people. That is my job. Yours is to make sure I understand it correctly." Elena appreciated this honesty. It made her feel less like a small voice being ignored by powerful people, and more like a real partner in the decisions being made. Not everyone on the council agreed with the careful, patient approach that Dr. Osei and General Chen had settled on. A vocal group of military leaders, led by a sharp-tongued admiral named Grace Whitfield, argued strongly for a more aggressive plan. Admiral Whitfield had spent her career preparing for worst-case scenarios, and she found it difficult to accept the idea of simply waiting and watching while an unknown alien force sat quietly near Earth. "We are gambling with the lives of every person on this planet," she said during one heated meeting, "based on the hope that creatures we have never spoken to, whose intentions we do not understand, will somehow prove to be peaceful. Hope is not a defense strategy." "No," Dr. Osei answered calmly, "but neither is blind aggression. If we attack first, based only on fear, we may create the very enemy we are afraid of, even if they came here with no hostile intention at all. We do not know their strength. Striking a wounded animal without understanding what wounded it is, often how people get hurt worse than if they had left it alone." The argument went back and forth many times over the following months, but each time, the council leaned toward patience rather than aggression, mostly because the evidence Elena and Tomas continued to gather suggested a wounded, cautious fleet rather than an aggressive one. Still, Admiral Whitfield's warnings were not ignored. They became part of why the military buildup continued so seriously, even while the council chose not to strike first. It was decided that humanity would prepare for the worst while hoping for the best, a balance that felt uncomfortable to almost everyone involved, but which nobody could argue against completely. Elena spent long nights thinking about the strange choice her species now faced. She had grown up believing, as many people did, that if aliens were ever discovered, the moment would be sudden and dramatic, filled with either terror or wonder, but always clear in what it meant. Instead, the reality was slow, uncertain, and filled with careful, unglamorous work, checking data twice, then 3 times, arguing over what a flicker of light might mean, and trying to imagine the intentions of a species based on nothing more than shadows and gravity. One evening, nearly a year after the first discovery, Elena found herself standing outside the secure facility, looking up at a clear night sky far from any city lights. She thought about how strange it was that somewhere out there, past the visible stars, past the edge of what any telescope could easily see, a group of wounded strangers were hiding, healing, and waiting, just as her own species now waited, watching them in return. She did not know, standing there under that quiet sky, whether the coming years would bring war or peace, disaster or friendship, but she did know that her small, tired discovery on an ordinary night shift had already changed the course of her world forever, and there was no going back to the quiet, simple life she had once known. Inside the facility behind her, screens continued to glow softly, tracking a fleet of wounded strangers who did not yet know they had been found, while far beyond the edge of the solar system, something else moved slowly through the dark, following an old trail that led toward a small, blue, unsuspecting world. 2 years passed since Elena Vasquez first found the strange shadow in the data from Watcher 9. In that time, the hidden fleet in the asteroid belt had not moved closer to Earth, but it had also not left. It stayed where it was, quietly repairing itself, while humanity kept watching from a careful distance, building its plans in silence. By now, the secret had grown to include thousands of people, scientists, soldiers, engineers, and leaders from every major country. Keeping something this big, hidden from the public, was not easy, but the Global Defense Council managed it by controlling information carefully, and by making sure that anyone who noticed anything strange was told a calm, boring explanation. When new radar stations appeared in remote deserts, the public was told they were for weather research. When old satellites were replaced, nobody questioned it, because satellites broke down all the time. Inside the council, however, the mood had changed. The fear of the unknown had slowly turned into something more like determined patience. People had grown used to the idea that aliens were real and nearby. They had stopped panicking and started planning, the way humans have always done when faced with a problem too big to solve quickly. General Marcus Chen still led the military side of things, but he now worked closely with Dr. Amara Osei, whose plan to let the fleet come closer, on human terms, had become the guiding idea behind everything the council did. Every decision, big or small, was measured against one question: does this help us understand them better, or does this risk making them afraid of us too soon? We are not just preparing weapons, Dr. Osei reminded the council often. We are preparing a first impression. That is just as important as any weapon we build. The military preparations, though quiet, were serious. New defense stations had been built on the far side of the moon, hidden from direct view of Earth, and disguised to look like simple mining operations. Deep in the oceans, a new generation of submarines carried weapons designed not for other nations, but for something much larger and much less known. In secret facilities scattered across the world, scientists studied the strange bursts of energy the fleet sometimes gave off, trying to reverse engineer even a small piece of the technology behind it. Progress was slow, but steady. Humans had never been the strongest or the fastest species, not even on their own planet, but they had always been good at learning quickly, working together under pressure, and refusing to give up even when things looked impossible. This was no different. Elena Vasquez had become one of the most trusted scientists in the entire program. She spent her days moving between meetings, laboratories, and monitoring rooms, always looking for new pieces of the puzzle. Tomas Reyes stayed by her side, and the two of them had become known as one of the sharpest teams in the whole effort, able to spot patterns in the data that others missed. One afternoon, Tomas came running into Elena's office, out of breath, holding a tablet with a shaking hand. "You need to see this," he said. Something changed. Elena looked at the screen. For the first time in 2 years, one of the larger ships in the fleet had moved. Not far, and not fast, but it had definitely moved, shifting its position within the asteroid belt in a way that seemed deliberate. "Repair complete?" Elena asked, almost to herself. "Maybe," Tomas said, "or maybe something else. There is more. Look at this." He showed her another set of numbers. A strange radio signal, very faint, had been picked up not from the fleet itself, but from somewhere much farther away, near the edge of the solar system. It did not look like a natural signal. It had structure, patterns, rhythm. "Could this be them talking to something outside?" Elena asked. "I do not think so," Tomas said. "I think this is something else talking to them, or near them. Something out past Neptune." The discovery was reported to the council immediately. Scientists spent days studying the new signal, trying to understand its source and its meaning. Slowly, a troubling picture began to form. The faint signal was not friendly chatter. Based on its pattern, and the way the hidden fleet had reacted to it by tightening its formation and increasing its shielding, most experts believed it was some kind of search signal, like sonar, sent out by something searching for the fleet. "They are being hunted," Dr. Osei said quietly during one meeting. "Whatever hurt them before, it may still be looking for them." This changed the mood of the entire council. If the fleet was being hunted by something else, an enemy from among the stars, then the picture was far more complicated than simply deciding whether to trust one group of aliens. There might be a second group out there, one that had already proven itself dangerous enough to badly damage a fleet of ships humans still could not match in technology. General Chen called an emergency meeting. "We need to consider," he said, "that we may not be facing one unknown power, but two, and the second one may already be far more dangerous than the first." The room was quiet for a long time. Then Elena spoke. surprising even herself with her own boldness. "If that is true," she said, "then maybe the wisest thing we can do is not decide between fear and friendship with the fleet already here. Maybe we should think about which side we would rather have as our neighbor, if a fight is coming no matter what we choose." It was a hard thing to say, and a harder thing to think about, but it planted a seed that would grow over the following months. If the hidden fleet truly was made up of refugees, wounded and running from something worse, then perhaps humanity's path forward was not simply about protecting Earth from one more threat. Perhaps it was about deciding whether to stand alone against whatever might be coming, or to find allies among the very beings hiding in their own backyard. Meanwhile, life on Earth continued as normal for almost everyone, since the public still knew nothing about the fleet or the search signal. But behind the scenes, everything sped up. New research programs were funded overnight, with almost unlimited budgets. Military leaders from rival nations who had barely spoken to each other in the past now shared information freely, understanding that petty arguments meant nothing next to the scale of what might be coming. Tomas Reyes, still young and still learning, found himself given more and more responsibility. One evening, while reviewing old data with fresh eyes, he noticed something nobody had caught before: a pattern in the way the fleet's shields flickered whenever the search signal passed nearby. It was not random. It looked almost like breathing, a slow rhythm of tightening and relaxing, as if the ships themselves were trying to survive by staying as quiet and still as possible. "They are terrified," Tomas said softly, showing the pattern to Elena. "Whatever is out there, they are truly afraid of it." Elena studied the pattern for a long time. "Fear like that," she said, "does not come from something small. It comes from something that has already hurt them badly, more than once." The council decided it needed better information, and to get it, they would have to take their first real risk. A single small satellite, disguised as space debris, was quietly placed on a path that would bring it closer to the fleet than any human object had ever come before, close enough to gather much better data, but hopefully still too small and quiet to be noticed. The mission, named Quiet Step, was one of the most tense moments in the entire program so far. If the satellite was noticed, the fleet might panic, might attack, might flee deeper into hiding, or might finally realize that humans had found them. Every possible outcome carried risk. Elena and Tomas sat together in the control room the night Quiet Step reached its closest point to the fleet. Around them, dozens of scientists and officers watched screens filled with numbers and images, waiting to see what would happen. The satellite passed close, gathered its data, and moved on, all without any sign that the fleet had noticed it. Everyone in the room let out a breath they had been holding for hours. The data Quiet Step gathered was worth the risk. For the first time, humans got a clear look at the fleet's true size and shape. There were 23 ships in total, ranging from small scout vessels to two very large ships that seemed to serve as the heart of the fleet, likely carrying most of its population and resources. Detailed images showed damage across many of the ships, some of it old and partly repaired, some newer and still raw. More importantly, Quiet Step captured a clearer version of the strange search signal from beyond Neptune. Scientists worked for weeks studying it, and slowly, using the same mathematical methods that had helped humans understand the fleet's basic patterns, they began to translate small pieces of it. The results were unsettling. The signal was not simply searching. It carried, hidden within its structure, something that seemed very much like a threat, or perhaps a demand. The scientists could not translate exact words, since there were no words, only patterns of light and sound. But the shape of the message, the way it repeated certain sequences with increasing intensity, matched patterns that human psychologists recognized from something very old and very human: an ultimatum. Someone, or something, far out in the dark edges of the solar system, was telling the hidden fleet that it had been found, and that there would be consequences. The council understood, finally, that time was running short. Whatever chase had driven the fleet to hide near Earth was not over. It was only paused, and when it resumed, Earth itself might be caught in the middle. General Chen stood before the full council one final time before the next stage of the plan would begin. "We have watched, and we have learned," he said. "Now we must decide what kind of neighbor we intend to be, not just to the fleet hiding in our asteroid belt, but to whatever hunts them. Because very soon, Hiding may no longer be a choice for any of us. Dr. Osei nodded slowly. Then let us make sure that when the fleet finally sees us, they see something worth trusting. And let us make sure that whatever comes looking for them understands one thing clearly. This system is not empty, and it is not undefended. Elena Vasquez, standing near the back of the room, felt a chill run through her. She thought of the strange, beautiful ship she had seen in that blurry image months ago. Patterns like scales or feathers, healing quietly in the dark. She thought of the fear hidden in its shields, the slow-breathing rhythm Tomas had discovered. And she thought of the cold, demanding signal from beyond Neptune, carrying a threat across the emptiness of space. Whatever happened next, she understood. Humanity was no longer simply watching from a safe distance. It had already become part of the story, whether it wanted to be or not. The Council's new plan took shape quickly after that night. Instead of waiting passively for the fleet to notice Earth on its own, humanity would take a small, careful step forward, letting a single signal reach the fleet. Not a threat, not a demand, but something closer to an offered hand. It would be humanity's first true attempt at contact, sent quietly, carefully, and with great hope that it would be understood the way it was meant. Nobody knew how the fleet would react. Nobody knew if the enemy beyond Neptune was already close enough to notice as well. But everyone in that room understood that the time for only watching had finally come to an end. Before that signal could be sent, however, the Council spent weeks debating exactly how it should be built, and who should be trusted with the responsibility of crafting humanity's first message to another species. Linguists argued with mathematicians. Physicists argued with psychologists. Everyone had a different idea about what should come first, what symbols were truly universal, and what risks existed in revealing too much, too soon. Dr. Osei led these discussions with the patience of someone who had spent her whole career studying how strangers learn to trust one another. She often reminded the group of old stories from human history, times when different tribes or nations, speaking different languages and holding different customs, had first tried to communicate peacefully after long periods of fear and distance. It rarely goes perfectly the first time, she said during one long meeting. But it goes better when the first move is small, honest, and does not ask for too much too quickly. We are not trying to explain all of humanity in one signal. We are trying to say, quietly and clearly, that we exist, we are aware, and we mean no harm. Tomas Reyes, though young, found himself deeply involved in this process, since his sharp eye for patterns made him useful in testing how different signal designs might be understood, or misunderstood, by a mind that had never encountered human ideas before. He spent long hours running simulations, imagining how an alien intelligence with no knowledge of human culture might interpret different sequences of light and sound. If we show hydrogen, he pointed out during one session, we are betting that they understand atomic structure the way we do. That seems like a safe bet, since physics should work the same way everywhere. But if we show something like a hand or a face, we are betting that they have hands or faces, or that they would even recognize ours as meaningful. That seems far riskier. This kind of careful thinking shaped the final signal, stripping away anything uncertain, and keeping only ideas rooted in mathematics and basic physical facts, things likely to be true and understandable anywhere intelligent life existed. It was not a beautiful message, nor a poetic one. It was simple, careful, and built for clarity above all else. While the scientists worked on the signal itself, the military side of the Council continued its own quiet preparations, moving forward on the assumption that first contact, whenever it truly came, would not erase the need for strong defenses. Admiral Whitfield, though she had lost the argument for an immediate strike, remained deeply involved in the buildup of Earth's hidden defenses, determined that if patience turned out to be a mistake, humanity would not be caught unprepared. I hope you are right about them, she told Dr. Osei privately, during a quiet moment away from the larger meetings. I truly do, but I will keep building weapons regardless, because hope makes a poor shield. Dr. Osei did not argue with this. She understood that both approaches, patience and preparation, needed to exist together, each one checking the other, so that neither fear nor blind trust alone could decide humanity's fate. Elena, meanwhile, found herself increasingly drawn into the deeper mystery of the search signal from beyond Neptune. She spent long nights working alongside a small team of physicists and codebreakers, trying to understand not just the shape of the signal, but what kind of technology could produce it. The energy levels involved were far beyond anything human science could currently create, suggesting a level of advancement that made even the wounded fleet's own technology seem almost old-fashioned by comparison. "If this is what a simple scout signal looks like," she said to Tomas one exhausted evening, "I do not want to imagine what their actual weapons look like." Tomas did not have a comforting answer for her, and for a while, they simply sat together in silence, staring at the numbers on the screen, each privately wondering what kind of universe humanity had truly stumbled into. It was during this uncertain, tense period that a strange kind of routine developed among the small circle of people who knew the full truth. Meetings blurred into long nights of data analysis, which blurred into short naps in secure quarters, which blurred into more meetings. Elena found herself measuring time not by days of the week, but by which new discovery had most recently shaken the room, or which argument between generals and scientists had most recently grown heated before cooler heads found a way forward. Despite the exhaustion and the fear, something else grew steadily during this time as well. A quiet, stubborn kind of hope. Every careful step forward, every small piece of understanding gained about the fleet and its unseen pursuer, felt like proof that patience and careful thought could accomplish something that fear and hasty action never could. Elena held on to that hope, even on the hardest nights, because it was the only thing that made the enormous uncertainty in front of her feel survivable. When the night finally came to send humanity's first signal toward the fleet, the room was quieter than Elena expected. There was no dramatic countdown, no grand speeches. Just a small group of tired, careful people, watching a screen as a simple pattern of light left a lonely satellite and began its long journey outward, carrying with it the hopes of an entire, still unaware world. The signal humanity sent toward the hidden fleet was small, careful, and simple. It was not a greeting made of words, since there were no shared words between the two species. Instead, it was built from mathematics, patterns of light, and simple sequences that any species who understood counting and physics could recognize. It began with numbers, 1, 2, 3, building up slowly, showing that whoever sent it understood order and logic. Then it showed the pattern of hydrogen, the most common element in the universe, something every spacefaring species would likely know. Finally, it showed a simple shape, a circle, followed by a smaller circle next to it, meant to represent two worlds close to each other, one large and one small, an invitation without threat. The signal was sent from a lonely research satellite far from Earth, chosen so that if anything went wrong, the fleet would trace the signal back to an empty piece of space, rather than directly to the planet. It was Dr. Osei's idea, born from years of studying how humans had once approached first contact between different tribes and nations throughout history. "Never reveal everything at once," she said. "Let trust grow in small, careful steps." For 3 days after the signal was sent, nothing happened. The fleet did not move. It did not respond. The tension inside the Global Defense Council grew heavier with each passing hour. Some officers began to argue that the plan had failed, that the fleet was too frightened, too damaged, or too suspicious to answer a stranger's signal, especially while still recovering from whatever had hurt it before. Elena Vasquez did not believe the plan had failed. She spent those 3 days barely sleeping, watching every scrap of new data that came in from the monitoring satellites, searching for any small sign of change. Tomas Reyes stayed with her most of that time, running calculations, checking old patterns, hoping to catch the first hint of a response before anyone else did. On the 4th night, he found it. "Elena," he said, voice tight with excitement, "look at this." The data showed a series of light pulses coming from one of the fleet's smaller ships, aimed carefully in the direction of the satellite that had sent the original signal. It was faint, and at first glance it looked almost like noise, the kind of random flicker satellites sometimes picked up from cosmic background radiation. But when Tomas ran it through the same pattern recognition tools used to study the original human signal, the pulses lined up perfectly. Numbers. 1, 2, 3. Then the pattern for hydrogen. Then 2 circles, one large, one small. They had answered. The room erupted into a mixture of shock, joy, and fear all at once. Scientists hugged each other. Officers exchanged serious looks, understanding that whatever came next could no longer be undone. Elena felt tears in her eyes, though she could not fully explain why. Perhaps it was relief. Perhaps it was the simple, overwhelming weight of being part of the first real conversation between humanity and another intelligent species. Over the following weeks, the exchange of signals grew slowly more complex. Both sides moved carefully, testing new patterns, building a shared understanding piece by piece. It was slow, frustrating work, filled with misunderstandings and dead ends, but progress came steadily. Humans learned that the fleet called itself, in the closest translation scientists could manage, the People of the Long Road, a name that seemed to reflect a history of travel, loss, and survival. The fleet, in turn, seemed to understand that the signal came from the small blue world nearby, and that this world was inhabited, aware, and willing to speak. It was during this careful exchange that humanity learned the truth Elena and Tomas had long suspected. The people of the Long Road were not conquerors, they were survivors. Long ago, their true homeworld, along with several other worlds under their care, had been attacked and destroyed by a rival power, a vast and aggressive empire that the Long Road people referred to, in the roughest translation available, as the Hollow Ones. The name came, scientists believed, from the empty, lifeless state the Hollow Ones left behind, wherever they conquered, stripping worlds of anything useful and leaving nothing alive. The fleet hiding in the asteroid belt was one of the last surviving groups of their people, having fled for years across the stars, always staying one step ahead of Hollow Scouts, searching for a place to rest, repair, and rebuild. 8 years ago, a Hollow scouting group had found them in a nearby system, leading to a fierce battle that heavily damaged the fleet before they managed to escape into the emptiness beyond, eventually finding Earth's solar system and the hiding place among the asteroids. The faint search signal detected months earlier, the one carrying what scientists believed to be a threat, was now understood clearly. It had come from a small Hollow scouting vessel that had picked up traces of the fleet while patrolling the outer edges of the solar system. The scout had sent a signal demanding surrender, threatening destruction if the fleet did not respond, before apparently withdrawing to report back to a larger Hollow force somewhere beyond the reach of human telescopes. This news was both a relief and a fresh source of worry for the Global Defense Council. The immediate danger, the fleet itself, appeared to pose no threat to Earth. If anything, they were desperate for peace, allies, and a safe place to heal. But the larger danger, the Hollow Ones, was now confirmed to be real, powerful, and already aware that something was hiding in this solar system. It was only a matter of time before a larger force arrived to investigate. General Chen laid out the situation plainly during a full council meeting. "We now know the fleet in our asteroid belt is not our enemy," he said. "But we also know they were followed here by something far more dangerous, something that has already destroyed entire worlds. That danger has not gone away. It has only been delayed." Dr. Osei added, "This changes everything about our approach. We are no longer simply deciding whether to trust one alien fleet. We are deciding whether we are ready to stand beside them against a much greater threat, or whether we try to remain hidden ourselves and hope the Hollow Ones never notice Earth at all." The idea of remaining hidden was quickly dismissed by most of the council. If the Hollow Ones had already sent one scout close enough to threaten the fleet, it was almost certain they would return, and when they did, they would likely investigate the entire system, including Earth itself. Hiding was no longer a real option, if it ever had been. Instead, the council turned its full attention toward building a true alliance with the people of the Long Road. Humanity offered what it could, a safe place near Earth for the fleet to continue repairs, protected by human defenses on the ground and in orbit, along with careful sharing of resources and knowledge. In return, the Long Road people, though still cautious and understandably wary after so many years of running, began sharing pieces of their own knowledge, small at first, careful not to give away too much too quickly, much the way humans had approached their own first signal. It was during this careful exchange that humans got their first real look at Long Road technology, technology far beyond anything Earth had built. Their ships used a form of engine that bent space itself slightly to move faster than light would normally allow, though the fleet's engines were now badly damaged and could barely manage a fraction of their original power. Their shields worked by scattering incoming energy across a wide area instead of blocking it directly, a method far more efficient than anything human engineers had designed. Even their basic metal, the strange scaled material Elena had first glimpsed in that blurry photograph, was stronger and lighter than any alloy humans could produce. Yet, alongside their advanced technology, the Long Road people showed clear signs of exhaustion and fear. Their population, based on careful estimates humans developed from studying the size and apparent purpose of the fleet's ships, was smaller than a single large human city. They had once been part of a much larger civilization, spread across many worlds, but the Hollow Ones had reduced them to this, a single wounded fleet, hiding in the shadow of a planet whose own people they had never expected to find, let alone befriend. Elena Vasquez became one of the lead scientists working directly with the growing stream of information passing between Earth and the fleet. It was slow, careful work, filled with moments of confusion and small breakthroughs, but she found herself deeply moved by what she learned. The Long Road people were not so different from humans in their core hopes. They wanted safety, a home, a chance to rebuild what they had lost. They had simply lost far more than any human nation ever had, and they had lost it to an enemy humanity had not even known existed a few years earlier. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of translation work, Tomas Reyes sat across from Elena in the quiet monitoring room they had shared for so long. "Do you think we are ready for this?" he asked. "An alliance with a species that has already lost everything, to something far stronger than us?" Elena thought carefully before answering. "I do not know if we are ready," she said. "But I know that hiding was never really a choice. Not once the Hollow Ones knew this system existed. At least this way, we choose our path with open eyes, standing beside someone, rather than waiting alone in the dark." Tomas nodded slowly. "The people of the Long Road have survived for years, running from an enemy that destroyed their homeworld. Maybe there is something we can learn from that kind of survival. And maybe," Elena added, "there is something they can learn from us too, about standing still instead of running, about choosing to face a threat together, instead of fleeing from it alone." Neither of them knew, in that quiet moment, just how soon that lesson would be tested. Far beyond the edge of the solar system, the Hollow Scout that had once threatened the fleet had already returned to its masters, carrying news of a hidden fleet, and something else entirely unexpected, signs of a young, unknown civilization, living quietly on a small world nearby, a world called Earth. The Hollow Ones did not often find new worlds filled with intelligent life that had not yet been catalogued and conquered. When such worlds were found, they were rarely left alone for long. Somewhere out in the vast darkness beyond Neptune, new engines were beginning to hum to life, turning slowly toward the sun, and toward the small blue planet that had just decided it was ready to stop hiding. Long before that distant engine hum reached human sensors, the slow work of building real trust between two species continued, filled with small moments that mattered far more than any grand announcement. One of the earliest breakthroughs came not from mathematics or physics, but from something far simpler: sharing images of home. Humans sent pictures of Earth, oceans and mountains and forests, alongside simple images of cities and families. In return, the Long Road fleet shared something that struck every scientist watching in the control room silent with emotion: old recorded images of their true homeworld, a planet with wide golden plains and deep violet skies, long since destroyed by the Hollow Ones. The images were faded and damaged, clearly copied and recopied many times, over years of running, treasured pieces of a place none of the fleet's people would ever see again. Elena remembered sitting in front of that image for a long time after it first arrived, unable to look away. It was the first time the abstract idea of the Long Road people's loss became something real and personal, rather than simply a fact recorded in a translated signal. "They lost an entire world," she said quietly to Tomas. "Not just ships, not just soldiers, a whole home, with skies like that." Tomas nodded, equally quiet. "Makes you look at your own sky differently, doesn't it?" This exchange of images opened a new kind of communication between the two species, one built less on cold data and more on shared feeling. Slowly, careful translators built up a small vocabulary of ideas: home, loss, hope, safety, trust. It was clumsy and imperfect, built from patterns of light that could only roughly capture such complicated ideas, but it was enough to begin real conversation. Commander Valus, the Long Road fleet's chosen voice in these early exchanges, proved to be a careful, thoughtful leader, cautious but not cold. She had lost family in the destruction of her homeworld, and later, more family in the battle that had crippled her fleet before it found refuge near Earth. Despite this, she carried herself with a steady patience that reminded Elena of General Chen, a similar quiet strength, built from carrying great responsibility for a long time. "Your people are young," Velas said once, through careful translation, during an early exchange, focused on simply learning about each other's history. "Young in the way a people are young, before they have lost enough to grow hard and careful. I hope you keep some of that softness, even as you learn what waits out among the stars." Elena found herself thinking about those words often in the months that followed, as human and long-road engineers began the delicate work of sharing technology and knowledge. It was slow-going at first. Long-road engineering relied on principles so far beyond current human science that early attempts at understanding often ended in confusion on both sides. Human engineers, used to building from the ground up with well-tested theories, sometimes struggled to accept ideas that seemed to break rules they had always trusted. Tomas, ever practical, found a way to bridge some of this gap by focusing on small, concrete projects rather than grand theories. Instead of trying to understand the full science behind long-road shield technology all at once, his team worked on replicating one small piece of it, a simple energy-scattering panel, testing it over and over until they understood enough to build their own working version, even if they did not yet fully understand every underlying principle. "We do not need to understand everything before we use anything," he told his frustrated colleagues one evening after a difficult day of testing. "We learn to walk by walking, not by first mastering the physics of balance." This practical approach paid off. Slowly, piece by piece, human technology advanced further in a few short years than it might have in decades of ordinary research. Shields grew stronger, communication systems grew clearer. Even ordinary infrastructure, like power generation, saw quiet improvements as scientists applied small lessons learned from studying long-road engineering. At the same time, the long-road people benefited from human ingenuity in ways that surprised even Velas. Human engineers, used to solving problems with limited resources and imperfect tools, found creative solutions to old long-road engineering problems that the fleet's own exhausted engineers had long since given up trying to solve, having grown accustomed to simply avoiding damaged systems rather than repairing them fully. "Your people find comfort in limitation," Velas observed once, watching a group of human engineers rig together a clever repair from mismatched, half-broken parts. "We had grown used to believing that only perfect tools could solve our problems. You have reminded us that clever hands can sometimes accomplish what perfect tools cannot." This growing exchange of ideas, skills, and trust did not happen without friction. There were moments of miscommunication that nearly caused real harm, small mistakes in translated meaning that led to brief moments of fear and suspicion on both sides before careful explanation smoothed things over. There were also debates, sometimes heated, over how much technology should be shared, and how quickly, since both sides understood that too much trust, given too soon, could be dangerous if it turned out to be misplaced. But slowly, month by month, real partnership grew from careful patience. Human and long-road scientists, once strangers separated by an unimaginable gap in experience and technology, began to see each other less as unknown variables to be studied, and more as colleagues working toward a shared goal: survival, safety, and the small, stubborn hope that It was against this backdrop of slowly growing trust that the news of the returning Hollow Scout finally arrived, carried through the same shared sensor network that had taken so long and so much careful work to build. The warning came almost a full year after the alliance between Earth and the people of the Long Road began. By then, the fleet had moved, slowly and carefully, closer to Earth, settling into a wide, quiet orbit near the Moon, still hidden from ordinary telescopes but no longer a secret to the people who mattered. Human engineers had spent months helping repair the fleet's damaged ships, learning as much as they taught, while long-road engineers shared careful lessons in shield design and energy efficiency that pushed human technology forward faster than 100 years of ordinary research could have done alone. Elena Vasquez, now recognized as one of the leading experts on long-road communication, stood in the same underground room outside Geneva where she had first reported the strange shadow so many years ago. The room looked different now. Screens showed not just Earth's own satellites, but shared sensor data from the long-road fleet itself, giving humanity eyes far beyond anything it had built on its own. It was one of those shared sensors that caught the warning first. A long-road scout ship, patrolling quietly at the edge of the solar system, as part of the joint defense network humans and their new allies had built together, detected a massive energy signature entering the system from deep space. It was moving fast, and it was big, far bigger than the single hollow scout that had once threatened the fleet years earlier. "This is not one ship," said Commander Valus, the long-road leader who now served as the fleet's main voice in dealing with humans. Valus had a way of speaking that came through the translation systems as calm, measured, and precise, though humans had learned to notice small signs of worry in the patterns of light that came with her words. "The energy signature is consistent with a full hollow strike group. Perhaps 12 to 15 vessels, larger than anything in my fleet." General Chen, older now, his hair fully gray, absorbed the news with the same calm he always tried to project, though those who knew him well could see the tension in his shoulders. "How long until they reach Earth?" "At their current speed," Valus said. "Perhaps 11 days. 11 days. It was both a very long time and no time at all. The Global Defense Council, along with long-road leadership, immediately began the hardest, fastest planning session of the entire Alliance's short history. The good news, if it could be called that, was that humanity and the long-road people were not facing this moment unprepared. Years of shared technology had produced real results. Human shipyards, working with long-road guidance, had built a small but real fleet of defense ships, faster and better shielded than anything humans could have built alone. Ground-based weapon systems, hidden across the world in disguised facilities, had been quietly completed and tested. Submarines carried new missiles designed with help from long-road engineers, built to punch through even advanced alien shielding. It was not a fleet capable of matching a full empire in open war. But it was not the fleet of a helpless, primitive world either. And more importantly, humanity was not facing this threat alone. "We fight together, or we do not fight at all," Valus said, during one of the final planning meetings, before the Hollow Fleet's arrival. "My people have run for many years. We are done running. If the Hollow Ones wish to finish what they started, they will find that this system is not the easy prize they expect." Dr. Osei, older now as well, though still sharp-minded, nodded slowly. "Humanity has always found strength in defending its home. This will be no different, even with an enemy from beyond the stars." The plan that formed over the following days combined the strengths of both species. Long-road ships, faster and better shielded despite their age and damage, would serve as the first line of defense, drawing enemy fire and testing hollow tactics, before pulling back to lure them into range of Earth's hidden defenses. Human ground and orbital weapons, disguised and scattered to avoid easy detection, would then strike from unexpected angles, using surprise as their greatest weapon, since the Hollow Ones would have no reason to expect a young, unknown species to fight back with any real skill. Tomas Reyes, now leading a full team of his own within the defense program, spent the final days before the Hollow Fleet's arrival, working almost without sleep, helping coordinate the shared sensor network between human and long-road systems, making sure that both sides could see the coming battle clearly and react quickly to whatever happened. "We only get one first strike that truly surprises them," he told his team during one of the final briefings. "After that, they will know what we can do. We need to make that first strike count." On the 11th day, exactly as predicted, the Hollow Fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system. It was larger than even the worst estimates had suggested. 14 ships, each one dwarfing the largest long-road vessel, moved in a slow, confident formation toward the inner solar system, clearly expecting no real resistance. Long-road sensors, shared instantly with human command centers, showed weapons far more powerful than anything humanity had faced before, alongside shielding technology that made the fleet's own defenses look outdated by comparison. For a tense day, the Hollow Fleet simply advanced, seemingly unaware that anything beyond a single wounded, hiding fleet awaited them. Then, as they entered range of the outer planets, the first shots were fired. A group of 6 long-road ships, positioned carefully near the orbit of Jupiter, engaged the lead elements of the Hollow Fleet in a fast, brutal exchange. The battle was fierce, and losses came quickly on both sides, though the smaller, more agile long-road ships managed to score more hits than the Hollow commanders likely expected. Still, it was clear within the first hour that the long-road ships alone could not hold against such a large force. Following the plan, they began a careful, staged retreat, drawing the Hollow fleet deeper into the solar system, toward Earth. This was the moment humanity had prepared years for. As the Hollow fleet pressed forward, confident in its pursuit, it passed through carefully placed minefields, hidden among the asteroid belt debris, invisible to Hollow sensors, because they had been built using stealth technology shared quietly by the Long Road themselves. Several Hollow ships took heavy damage from the surprise explosions, their shields straining against attacks they had never expected from a supposedly primitive system. Then, as the fleet drew closer to Earth's orbit, human defenses activated in full. Hidden weapon platforms, disguised for years as ordinary satellites and space debris, opened fire in a coordinated strike unlike anything Earth had ever attempted. Ground-based weapons, built deep in mountains and deserts around the world, added their own fire, striking with pinpoint accuracy thanks to the powerful shared sensor network Tomas and his team had spent years perfecting. The Hollow commanders, used to easy conquests over less prepared worlds, found themselves suddenly facing a battle they had not planned for. Ships that should have been simple targets fought back with real skill and real force. A fleet they believed to be a single wounded, isolated group turned out to be defended by an entire, previously unknown civilization, armed and ready. The battle raged for nearly 6 hours. A brutal, chaotic fight spread across the space near Earth's orbit. Losses came on both sides. 2 long-road ships were destroyed, along with several smaller human defense platforms. But slowly, steadily, the combined defense began to turn the tide. Hollow ships, damaged by the earlier minefield and now caught in a crossfire between long-road maneuvering and human firepower, began to fall back. By the end of the 6th hour, the Hollow fleet, having lost 4 of its 14 ships and suffered heavy damage across most of the rest, made the decision to retreat, pulling back from the inner solar system far faster than it had advanced. A cheer went up in the underground command center outside Geneva, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and disbelief. Elena Vasquez, watching the final data come in, confirming the Hollow retreat, found herself crying, for the 2nd time in her career, this time from a very different kind of overwhelming feeling. General Chen allowed himself a small, tired smile as he looked around the room. "We held," he said simply. "Together, we held." Commander Velas's voice came through the translation system, calm as always, though something in the pattern of her words carried a weight humans had learned to recognize as deep emotion. "For the first time in many years," she said, "my people did not run. We stood, and we were not alone. This is a debt my people will remember." The retreat of the Hollow fleet was not the end of the danger. Everyone understood that clearly. A defeated scouting force would return to report to whatever larger power commanded it, and a much larger response might follow in time. But for now, Earth and its unexpected allies had won a victory that would have seemed impossible only a few years earlier. A young, previously unknown civilization, standing beside a wounded refugee fleet, had turned back a force from a vast alien empire. Tomas Reyes, standing beside Elena as the final reports came in, let out a long breath. "We are not primitive anymore," he said quietly. "Not to them. Not to anyone out there." Elena nodded, looking at the shared display showing human and long-road ships moving together to secure the space near Earth, tending to the wounded, repairing what damage they could. "No," she said. "We are something else now, something they will have to take seriously." Far beyond the edge of the solar system, the surviving Hollow ships limped away into the dark, carrying with them a report that would soon reach ears far more powerful and far more dangerous than any single scouting commander. The small, unknown world called Earth, once thought to be an easy, empty prize hiding a wounded refugee fleet, had proven itself to be something else entirely. A threat, an ally, and above all, a survivor. In the days leading up to the battle, as the Hollow fleet drew steadily closer, life inside the command center had taken on a strange, tense rhythm that Elena would remember for the rest of her life. Sleep came in short, broken pieces, grabbed between briefings. Meals were eaten standing up, often forgotten halfway through as new data demanded attention. Yet amid all the exhaustion, there was also a strange kind of clarity, the sort that comes when a danger long feared in the abstract finally becomes something real and immediate. General Chen had spent the final night before the battle, walking slowly through the command center, stopping to speak quietly, with soldiers, scientists, and engineers alike, thanking each one for their work, offering steady words of encouragement rather than grand speeches. Elena watched him do this and understood, perhaps for the first time, why so many people trusted him so completely. He did not pretend the danger was small. He simply made clear, through his calm presence, that facing it together made it bearable. Admiral Whitfield, once one of the loudest voices arguing for an early strike against the Long Road Fleet, had become in these final years one of the sharpest architects of the Joint Defense Plan. Her early distrust transformed into fierce, focused determination to make sure that whatever came, humanity and its allies would be ready. On the night before the battle, she oversaw the final positioning of the hidden minefields personally, checking and rechecking every detail with a soldier's careful thoroughness. "I hope I was wrong about them," she admitted quietly to Dr. Osei, watching final preparations unfold on a wall of screens. "About the Long Road people, I mean. I hope this alliance proves stronger than my old fears." "You were not entirely wrong to be careful," Dr. Osei answered. "Caution is not the same as cruelty. It kept us prepared, even while we chose to trust." Both things mattered. When the battle finally began, Elena found herself stationed in a secondary monitoring room, coordinating data flow between human and long-road sensor systems, alongside Tomas and a dozen other exhausted, focused scientists. The room was filled with the low hum of machines and the quiet, tense voices of people relaying critical information as calmly as they could manage, even as explosions lit up sensor feeds showing distant, brutal combat. She remembered watching the moment the first long-road ship was lost, a small icon on a screen simply going dark, representing dozens of living beings who had survived years of running from the Hollow Ones, only to fall defending a world that had been their home for barely 3 years. She remembered, too, the strange mixture of grief and fierce determination that swept through the room in that moment, as everyone present understood clearly what was truly at stake. Tomas, usually calm under pressure, gripped the edge of his console tightly as the minefield detonated successfully against the advancing Hollow ships, watching the enemy formation break apart in confusion. "It's working," he said, voice tight. "It's actually working." Elena did not answer right away, too focused on relaying updated targeting data to the hidden human weapon platforms preparing to strike. It was only later, once the battle had shifted clearly in humanity's favor, that she allowed herself a small, shaking breath of relief. The final hours of the battle passed in a blur of coordinated strikes, careful retreats, and desperate defense, each side testing the other's limits in real time. Human weapon platforms, though smaller and less individually powerful than Hollow warships, made up for this through sheer coordination and surprise, striking from angles the Hollow commanders had never accounted for, guided by a sensor network built through years of careful, shared work between two very different peoples. When the Hollow retreat finally began, it did not happen all at once. It began with a single damaged Hollow ship breaking formation, followed slowly by others, until the entire remaining force pulled back in a ragged, hurried withdrawal that looked nothing like the confident advance that had entered the system only a day earlier. In the command center, the realization that the battle was truly won came slowly, spreading through quiet murmurs before erupting into full, unrestrained celebration. Strangers hugged each other. Exhausted soldiers who had not slept in 2 days allowed themselves to laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. Elena found herself pulled into a tight embrace by Tomas, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by relief neither had fully expected to feel so strongly. Commander Valus, addressing General Chen and the assembled council shortly after the retreat was confirmed, allowed herself a rare moment of open emotion, her voice carrying through the translation system with a warmth few had heard from her before. "For many years," she said, "my people have measured victory only by how far we managed to run, and how many of us survived the running. Today, for the first time since the fall of our true home, we measured victory differently. We measured it by how well we stood, together with new friends, rather than how far we fled alone." The cost of that victory, however, was not forgotten amid the celebration. Memorial ceremonies were held in the days that followed, honoring both the human and long road lives lost in the defense of Earth. It was the first time such a ceremony had ever combined the customs of two entirely different species. Human words of remembrance, spoken alongside careful long road rituals of honoring the fallen. Translated as, best as anyone could manage, though everyone present understood that grief, in the end, needed little translation at all. Elena stood at one such ceremony beside Tomas, watching as human soldiers and long road crew members stood shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed together in shared loss and shared gratitude. She thought about how impossible this scene would have seemed only a few years earlier, when she had been nothing more than a tired scientist staring at a strange shadow on an ordinary night shift. "We did this," she said quietly to Tomas. "All of it, starting from one blurry shadow." Tomas nodded slowly, still watching the quiet ceremony unfold. "One shadow," he agreed, "and a whole lot of very tired, very stubborn people who refused to look away from it." The weeks after the battle were some of the strangest and busiest in human history, though almost none of it was known to the public yet. The Global Defense Council, along with Long Road leadership under Commander Velas, worked around the clock, repairing damaged ships, treating the wounded, and preparing for whatever might come next. The victory over the Hollow scouting fleet had bought time, but everyone understood it had not bought safety. A defeated force would report back, and a larger power, somewhere out among the stars, would eventually decide how to respond. Elena Vasquez found herself busier than ever, now serving as one of the main bridges between human scientists and long-road engineers, helping translate not just words and numbers, but ideas, culture, and history between the two peoples. It was slow, careful work, filled with small misunderstandings and unexpected discoveries, but it moved forward steadily, built on the trust that had grown through years of careful cooperation. Tomas Reyes, no longer the nervous young analyst who had once run breathless into Elena's office with shocking news, now led one of the largest joint defense research teams on the planet. He had grown into his role naturally, guided by both the lessons of hard experience and the quiet confidence that came from knowing his work had helped save his entire world. One afternoon, several months after the battle, Elena and Tomas found themselves once again in the underground room outside Geneva, though the room looked very different from the quiet, tense space it had once been. Screens now displayed a much larger network of sensors, spread not just around Earth but throughout much of the solar system, watching carefully for any sign of further hollow activity. Long-road engineers worked alongside human scientists at nearly every station, a sight that would have seemed impossible only a few years earlier. Commander Velas had become a regular presence in these meetings, her calm, careful voice now familiar to almost everyone in the room. On this particular day, she brought news that the entire council had been waiting anxiously to hear. "Our scouts, working along the outer edge of the system, report no further sign of a large hollow force approaching," she said. "It appears the scouting group we defeated has not yet been replaced. This does not mean the danger has passed. It means we have been given time." General Chen, now nearing retirement age but still leading the military side of the alliance with the same steady calm he had always shown, nodded slowly. "Time is valuable," he said. "We should use it wisely." The council's new plan, developed over the following weeks, focused on using this quiet period to grow stronger, not just in weapons and ships, but in the depth of the alliance itself. Long-road engineers continued sharing careful lessons in advanced shielding and propulsion, while human scientists offered fresh ideas, drawn from a species that had learned to survive and adapt quickly, even without the advanced technology their new allies had once possessed. Slowly, a new kind of combined technology began to emerge, neither fully human nor fully long-road, but something built from the best of both. At the same time, the council finally began preparing to share the truth with the wider public. It was a difficult decision, debated for weeks. Some worried the news would cause panic. Others argued that after everything humanity and the long-road people had already survived together, the public deserved to know the truth, and deserved the chance to take pride in what had been quietly achieved on their behalf. In the end, it was Dr. Osei, still serving as one of the council's wisest voices even as she grew older, who convinced the others to move forward. "People are stronger than we often give them credit for," she said. "They survived wars, disasters, and hard times before, always finding a way through. They deserve to know that their world did not simply survive by luck. It survived because it chose courage, and because it chose to stand beside others who needed help, rather than turning away in fear. The announcement, when it finally came, was handled carefully, with clear explanations, careful evidence, and honest answers to the many questions that followed. There was fear, of course, and confusion, as anyone might expect, when told that alien life was real, and that a great battle had already been fought and won, near their own planet without their knowledge. But there was also something else, something Dr. Ose had predicted. Pride. Pride in scientists who had quietly worked for years to protect their home. Pride in soldiers who had stood their ground against an enemy far more powerful than anything humanity had prepared for before. And slowly, growing pride in a new kind of friendship between two very different peoples, brought together first by hidden fear, and later by shared courage. Commander Valus, addressing a small gathering of world leaders and scientists during a carefully arranged public broadcast, spoke words that would be remembered for a long time afterward. My people came to this system running, wounded and afraid, expecting only more loss, she said, her voice carried through careful translation to a watching world. Instead, we found a young civilization, willing to watch patiently, to reach out carefully, and finally, to stand beside us when the moment for courage arrived. We did not expect kindness from strangers. We did not expect strength either. Your people showed us both. Elena Vasquez, watching the broadcast from a quiet corner of the control room, thought back to the night she had first seen that strange shadow blocking distant starlight, so many years ago. She had been tired, drinking cold coffee, expecting nothing more than another quiet, boring shift. Instead, she had found the beginning of something that would change her world forever. Tomas stood beside her, watching the same broadcast. "Do you think this is really the beginning of peace?" he asked quietly, "or just the calm before something bigger comes?" Elena thought about the question carefully before answering. "Maybe both," she said. "The hollow ones are still out there. Someday, they may come back in greater numbers. But we are not the same world we were when this all started. We are not alone anymore, and we are not as weak as we once believed." "No," Tomas agreed. "We are something new now, something ready." Over the following year, the alliance between Earth and the Long Road people continued to grow stronger. Joint shipyards were built, combining the best of both technologies. Combined defense forces trained together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Slowly, the quiet, hidden fleet that had once frightened a handful of scientists staring at strange data in the middle of the night became something else entirely, a symbol of hope, proof that even the most unlikely alliance could grow from careful patience, honest effort, and shared courage. Far beyond the edge of the solar system, the vast and dangerous power known as the Hollow Ones continued its slow, patient conquest of other worlds, unaware for now that a new kind of resistance had quietly begun forming near a small, unremarkable blue planet, one they had once assumed would be an easy addition to their growing empire. They would learn otherwise, in time, but for now, in the quiet peace that followed hard-won victory, Earth and its new allies focused on growing stronger, preparing carefully for whatever challenges still lay ahead among the stars. Elena Vasquez, standing one evening on the roof of the Geneva Command Center, looked up at the night sky, filled with more stars than she had ever truly noticed before that strange night years ago. Somewhere among those distant points of light, danger still waited. But closer now, in the quiet orbit near the moon, friends waited too, patient, healing, and no longer alone. She smiled, thinking of how far her world had come since that first quiet, tired night shift, and of how much farther it still had to go. Humanity had chosen, in a moment of great uncertainty, to be brave rather than fearful, patient rather than reckless, and open rather than closed. It was a choice that had changed everything, and it was a choice, she knew, that humanity would need to make again and again in the uncertain, wide universe that lay ahead. For now, though, under a sky full of old light from distant stars, there was only quiet, hopeful peace, earned through patience, courage, and the simple, powerful decision to let a wounded fleet come closer, rather than push it away. In the months following the public announcement, the world adjusted slowly to its new reality. Schools began teaching children about the Long Road people, alongside ordinary history lessons, and for the first time, young students grew up understanding that they lived not merely on a single, isolated planet, but as part of a much larger, more complicated universe, filled with both danger and possibility. Museums built new exhibits, carefully approved by both human and Long Road leadership, sharing pieces of Long Road history and culture, with a curious public, eager to understand more about their new allies. Not everyone adjusted easily. Some people reacted with fear, unable to fully accept that creatures so different from themselves could truly be trusted as friends. Protests occasionally broke out in various cities, driven by those who worried that the alliance risked more than it protected, or by others who resented the years of secrecy the council had maintained, before finally revealing the truth. Dr. Osei, now older and often called upon as a calming public voice, spent much of her remaining career addressing these fears directly, speaking patiently at town halls and public forums, never dismissing people's concerns, but always gently reminding them of everything that had already been achieved through careful patience rather than fear. "It is natural to be afraid of what is different," she said during one such gathering, standing before a large, uncertain crowd. "But fear alone has never built anything lasting. It was patience, curiosity, and courage that saved this world once already. I trust those same qualities to guide us forward, if we choose to hold on to them." Slowly, as ordinary people began meeting Long Road representatives in person, at carefully organized public events, and eventually in everyday settings, as small Long Road communities began settling temporarily on Earth, to continue healing and rebuilding, much of the fear gave way to simple curiosity, and in time, genuine friendship. Long Road children, still few in number but growing more numerous as the fleet's population slowly stabilized and healed, played alongside human children in carefully monitored community programs, learning each other's games, sharing each other's songs, forming friendships uncomplicated by the fears and careful calculations that had once dominated every conversation between their elders. Elena Vasquez found herself, almost without meaning to, becoming something of a public figure, often asked to speak about the early days of discovery, about the tired night shift that had started everything. She never fully grew comfortable with this kind of attention, preferring the quiet focus of research work to public speeches, but she understood the importance of sharing her story honestly, especially with young students eager to understand how ordinary people, doing careful, patient work, had ended up changing the course of history. "I was not a hero," she told one group of visiting students, during a tour of the now partly declassified research facility where it had all begun. "I was tired, and I was drinking bad coffee, and I almost ignored the alert, because old satellites sent false alarms all the time. The only thing I did differently that night was choose to check twice, before assuming it was nothing." That is all any of this really started with. Checking twice. Tomas Reyes, meanwhile, continued to rise within the growing joint defense and research programs, eventually taking on a leadership role training a new generation of scientists and engineers in both human and Long Road methods. He often thought back to those long, exhausting nights early in the program, when he and Elena had been little more than two tired analysts staring at confusing data, never imagining how far their careful, patient work would eventually lead. General Chen retired quietly 2 years after the battle, passing leadership of the military side of the alliance to a new generation of officers who had grown up, professionally, entirely within the strange new reality of alien contact. At his retirement ceremony, held jointly by human and Long Road leadership, Commander Velas herself spoke, honoring the calm, careful leadership that had guided Earth's defense through its most uncertain years. "You did not lead with fear," she said, addressing the general directly. "Nor did you lead with recklessness. You led with patience and with the courage to trust careful thought over quick reaction. My people, who have lost much to leaders who acted from fear alone, recognize the rare value of what you gave your world." Life, in its own strange way, slowly grew ordinary again, even amid the extraordinary new reality of open alliance with another species. People still went to work, raised families, argued over small everyday matters, much as they always had. But underneath that ordinary rhythm ran a new thread of shared purpose, a quiet understanding that Earth was no longer alone in facing whatever challenges the wider universe might eventually bring. Joint shipyards near Earth's orbit grew busier each year, producing new generations of ships built from combined human and Long Road knowledge, faster and stronger than anything either species could have built alone. Combined training academies opened, teaching young recruits from both peoples to work together as equals, preparing for a future neither side could fully predict, but which both understood they would face together. Commander Valus, now serving as a permanent liaison between Long Road and human leadership, often visited the original research facility, where Elena and Tomas had first uncovered the fleet's presence so many years earlier. She found something meaningful, she once explained, in standing in the place where such a careful, patient choice had first been made, a choice that had ultimately saved both their peoples from far greater loss. "Your world chose curiosity over fear that night," she said once, standing beside Elena at the very telescope that had first captured that strange, fleeting shadow years before. "It is a small thing, perhaps, in the vast scale of the universe, but small choices, made carefully and bravely, have a way of changing everything that follows." Elena, looking up at the same clear night sky she had once studied through tired, cautious eyes, found herself agreeing completely. The universe remained vast, uncertain, and filled with dangers still unknown, including the ever-present shadow of the Hollow Ones, somewhere out among the distant stars. But Earth no longer faced that uncertain future alone, hidden and afraid. It faced it openly, alongside friends earned through patience, courage, and the simple, quiet decision, made one tired night years ago, to look twice at a strange shadow rather than looking away. And somewhere out past the edge of the solar system, in the deep, patient dark where danger still waited, that choice continued to matter, every single day, in ways neither Elena nor anyone else could yet fully imagine.